Bang, bang, bang. That sound, sharp, loud, and angry, rattled my front door like it owed someone money. I jolted upright in bed, heart pounding like a drumline. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. 12:06 a.m. Not 8, not 10, but past midnight. At first, I thought it was a dream. Maybe some leftover noise from a movie I fell asleep watching. But then, bang, bang, bang. Again, louder, more aggressive. Like whoever was outside wanted to break the door in or scare the soul out of me. And then I heard the voice. Open this door right now. Sharp, piercing, loaded with rage. But more than that, familiar. I sat there for a second, frozen. My brain was still rebooting. I live in a quiet neighborhood. A little too quiet sometimes. Nothing ever happens here. People mow their lawns at the same time every weekend. Cars don't honk. Even the squirrels are polite. But this wasn't normal. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I threw on a hoodie and stumbled to the front hallway. As I got closer to the door, I could see a shadow moving behind the frosted glass window. And then came the sound of something tapping, no, banging, against it. I looked through the peephole, and my jaw dropped. Karen. Yup, her. Wearing a pink bathrobe, fuzzy slippers, and hair rollers. She had a flashlight in one hand like she was leading a search party, and her phone in the other, probably already halfway through a 911 call. The queen of complaints. The high priestess of petty. The self-proclaimed commander of the HOA. Honestly, I wasn't even surprised. You see, if you've never dealt with someone like Karen, count your blessings. She's the kind of neighbor who takes the words homeowners association and turns them into a full-time obsession. She's the reason you double-check your mailbox paint, the angle of your lawn chairs, and whether your garden gnome is facing due north. Karen doesn't sleep. She patrols. Karen doesn't relax. She enforces. She once put a bright yellow warning sticker on my trash can because I rolled it out 30 minutes early. Another neighbor got a written violation for leaving a beach towel on a railing. A towel. On his own porch. One time, a little girl down the street drew a hopscotch pattern on the sidewalk with chalk. Harmless, right? Karen called an emergency HOA meeting and said, "We don't allow vandalism here." You get the idea. I had managed to fly under her radar for most of the year. I kept my lawn cut, my bins rolled in, and my porch light within regulation wattage. But now she was here, at my door, in the middle of the night, looking like she was ready to file a lawsuit on sight. I unlocked the door, but only cracked it open. "Karen," I said groggily, half whispering. "It's past midnight. What's going on?" She didn't even wait for me to finish. "You're in violation," she shrieked. "I tried to call you, but you didn't answer. You have a vehicle in your driveway that isn't on the HOA list. And your curtains are the wrong color. And your porch light is set to the wrong brightness level. It's disturbing the neighborhood vibe." I blinked. Was I dreaming? Nope. This was real. She was really yelling at me about curtains at 12:06 in the morning. "Karen," I said calmly, still barely conscious. "Can we talk about this tomorrow? Like in the daytime?" She jabbed her flashlight toward my face like she was making a citizen's arrest. "No. You need to fix this now. I will not stand by and watch this community fall apart because you can't follow basic rules." I took a deep breath, trying to stay cool. "Look, I'll move the truck tomorrow. And the curtains." But she cut me off. "No. You'll do it now? Or I'm calling the police." She didn't wait for a reply. She, literally, dialed 911, right there on my porch. "Hello? Yes. I'm with the Oak Ridge HOA, and I'm reporting a neighbor refusing to follow residential codes. He's being non-compliant, and, yes, it's urgent." Now I was fully awake. She had lost her mind. Completely. Over curtains? And the worst part? She didn't know who I really was. I cracked the door open just wide enough to peek out. Karen's flashlight immediately hit me in the eyes like I was being interrogated by the FBI. I squinted. "Is there an emergency?" She didn't blink. "Yes. You have a brown truck parked outside that's not on the HOA-approved vehicle list." I blinked slowly, trying to process what she was saying. "Wait, what?" She continued, like she had rehearsed it all day. "And your Christmas lights are still up, and it's February. That violates Seasonal Decor Code 7B. And worst of all, you have blue curtains in your front window." She said that like it was a felony, like I had robbed a bank and used the blue curtains to cover my escape. I looked at her, completely bewildered. "Karen, it's midnight." She crossed her arms. So what? Rules don't sleep. That's when I knew she was completely serious. Not just serious. Deadly committed to her made-up mission of protecting the neighborhood from the terrible terror of off-season lights and curtain color violations. I sighed and tried to close the door. Okay, Karen, let's talk about this tomorrow. I'm sure there's a more reasonable time for this. But before the door could even shut halfway, she shoved her slipper-covered foot between it and the frame and leaned in. If you don't fix this right now, I'm calling the police. I stared at her. She was shaking, not with fear, but with righteous fury, like she was doing the Lord's work by defending the neighborhood from my tow truck and festive twinkle lights. I said nothing, just stood there in stunned silence. And then, she did it. She pulled out her phone and actually dialed 911, like this was a hostage situation. I watched in disbelief as she pressed the call button and immediately started shouting into the speaker like she was on a war hotline. Hello, yes. I have a neighbor who's refusing to remove non-HOA-approved curtains. No joke. That was her opening line. Curtains. She didn't even lead with a fake noise complaint or say there was a suspicious person. Nope. Straight to the window decor. I could actually hear the confusion in the dispatcher's voice through the phone. I couldn't make out the exact words, but from Karen's reaction, they clearly weren't taking her seriously. Because now she was yelling even louder. Send someone now. He's ignoring the rules. He's being uncooperative. This is a community safety issue. At that point, I was sure the dispatcher was either laughing silently or placing a bet with her coworker on whether this was a prank call. Meanwhile, I stood barefoot in my doorway, still trying to comprehend how my peaceful evening had turned into a curtain-based standoff with a 911 operator as an unwilling participant. The part that really stung? I'd lived in this neighborhood for over a year. Quietly, respectfully, I mowed my lawn, waved at my neighbors, never once played loud music. No crazy parties. No drama. The worst thing I'd done was forget to roll my trash bin in once during a rainstorm. But here I was, being treated like a fugitive. And over what? A truck, some lights, and blue curtains. Blue curtains. The same kind I bought at a discount store because they matched the couch. The same ones I didn't know were apparently color-coded violations in Karen's neighborhood Bible. To her, this wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a misunderstanding. To Karen, this was war. And in her eyes, I was the enemy. As she continued screaming into her phone, waving her flashlight around like a traffic cone on caffeine, I realized something. This woman had no idea who she was messing with. Not yet, but she would soon. About 15 minutes after Karen's ridiculous 911 call, the flashing red and blue lights rolled through the neighborhood like it was a crime scene. 2 squad cars, 2 officers, and 1 furious HOA Karen pacing in my driveway like she was preparing a closing argument for court. As soon as the first officer stepped out, Karen sprinted toward him like she was running for mayor. There, she said, pointing directly at me. That's the man. He's refusing to comply with HOA codes, and he's being hostile. He yelled at me. And his truck is unauthorized. His curtains are blue. Officer, blue. You'd think she caught me burying evidence in the backyard. The officer calmly walked toward my porch. Sir, are you okay? I nodded, rubbing my forehead. I'm fine, officer. A little sleep-deprived, but otherwise fine. Karen here just woke up the entire neighborhood over curtains. Karen stormed in from behind him. They're not HOA approved. Section 4, line 3 of the HOA charter clearly says. The officer held up his hand. Ma'am, please, let me speak with him first. She backed off, but only physically. Her face still screamed, I'm the real victim here. The second officer joined us. Both of them were polite, but I could tell they were confused. I mean, who calls 911 at midnight for a curtain dispute? That's when I decided, now's the time. I stepped back into the house briefly, walked to a drawer in the entryway, and pulled out a navy blue folder I had tucked away for a very specific kind of moment. This one. I came back outside and handed it to the officer without a word. He raised an eyebrow and started flipping through the contents. Property records, tax receipts, plat maps, legal filings, the real stuff. After a few seconds, his expression changed. The way someone's face does when they realize they just stepped into something much bigger than they thought. He showed a few pages to the second officer, who also took a moment to process it. Then they both turned and looked at me with wide eyes. Karen, watching from just a few feet away, squinted. What is that? Some fake HOA excuse. I've seen people do this on Facebook. They print fake letters and try to act like they're above the rules. I swear if you're lying. I looked directly at her. Calm. Controlled. And then I said it. Actually, it's the property deed. And not just for my house. Karen froze. I continued. This folder holds the legal deed to this entire subdivision. And also the next 2 blocks east. Including the land your house sits on. Karen blinked. Once. Twice. I bought it last year through an old holding company. It was buried in a foreclosure trust from the original developer. Took me months of paperwork to clean it up. But yeah, it's mine now. You're lying. She spat, her voice cracking. I just smiled and nodded to the officers. You can verify it with the county office. The paperwork's all in order. One of the officers spoke softly into his radio. The other asked, so you're saying you own this land? Every square foot, I replied. HOA included. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. And here's the kicker. She had no idea. She thought she was yelling at just another tired homeowner. She thought she could bully me into removing my curtains and my truck because she had a title on a piece of paper and a flashlight in her hand. But now, she was standing on my property, yelling about my rules, while calling the cops on her landlord. The officer turned to her. Ma'am, it looks like this isn't a police matter at all. And from what I can tell, you may have just made a false report to 911. Karen sputtered. I didn't know. He never said. This has to be illegal. The officer shook his head. That's something for your civil board to handle. But at this point, I suggest you stop making midnight calls unless there's a real emergency. She didn't respond. She just stood there, arms crossed, robe fluttering slightly in the wind, looking like her entire universe had shifted. And honestly, it had. Karen's jaw dropped so hard I'm surprised it didn't crack the pavement. What are you talking about? That's impossible, she stammered, backing up a step. Her voice had lost that high-pitched confidence. Now it trembled, trying to find footing in a conversation that had spiraled way beyond HOA violation reports. I turned calmly to the officers, speaking clearly for everyone to hear, including the few curious neighbors now peeking out through blinds and cracked doors. When I moved in last year, I started noticing strange patterns in the HOA's operations, outdated policies, unregistered bylaws, even expired governing documentation. That got me curious. I did some digging and found out the land for this subdivision was never properly reassigned after the original development company dissolved. I paused. The holding company still legally existed, on paper, dormant, forgotten, but alive. So I bought it. Karen blinked. You what? Bought it, I repeated. Along with its assets, meaning the land deeds, development rights, and full control of the HOA. I tried to be quiet about it. I wanted to make gradual changes and avoid drama. I looked right at her now. But tonight, you gave me a reason to go public. Karen laughed nervously, her arms folded tightly across her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. That's ridiculous. You can't just buy a neighborhood. This isn't Monopoly. One of the officers spoke up. Actually, ma'am, this paperwork looks valid. And if what he's saying is true, he didn't just buy a house here. He owns the management rights to this entire subdivision and possibly the land underneath it. Karen's face started losing color. Her superiority complex was crumbling right in front of me, piece by piece. I could almost hear her brain doing cartwheels trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. No, this must be fake, she snapped. He probably made those documents in Photoshop. The officer gave her a look. Ma'am, this came directly from county records. It checks out. Karen's eyes darted from the officer to me to the folder, then back to me. For the first time in forever, she didn't have a comeback. Then came the moment she truly lost control. The first officer tilted his head and said, Ma'am, let's talk about your actions tonight. You called 911 at midnight for a non-emergency. Karen immediately jumped in, panicking. Wait, no? I didn't mean to cause trouble. I thought I was doing my job. He wasn't listening. The curtains were blue. He sighed. You disturbed the peace, made a false report, and wasted emergency resources. That's a serious offense. She started backing away, waving her arms like she could push the words back into the officer's mouth. I'm the HOA president. I was just upholding our code. I raised a single finger and calmly said, Former president. She froze. I continued. As of last week, I submitted paperwork to dissolve the current HOA board and establish a private residential oversight model. It's legally approved. Your position, along with the board, no longer exists. The silence that followed hit harder than anything she'd said all night. I could almost hear the air deflate from her ego like a balloon. Karen's eyes went wide, her voice a whisper now. You're lying. Nope, I replied. In fact, I was going to announce it at next month's meeting, but thanks to tonight's curtain emergency, I figured I'd accelerate the process. I looked at the officer. Would you mind letting her know she's no longer authorized to enforce anything on this property? The officer turned to Karen and said flatly, Ma'am, unless you have written, active authority under a valid HOA structure, you're not in charge of anything here anymore. I suggest you go home. Karen looked around. The porch lights, the squad cars, the neighbors who were now filming from across the street. It finally hit her. She wasn't the sheriff anymore. She wasn't the queen. She was just Karen, in a pink bathrobe, on someone else's property, with no power. And her stunned silence? That was the sweetest HOA violation of all. By sunrise the next morning, the entire neighborhood knew. You could feel the shift in the air, lighter, freer, like someone had finally opened a window in a stuffy room. Word had traveled faster than wildfire, and in a community where even a misplaced flower pot had once earned a formal citation, Karen getting knocked off her imaginary throne was bigger than the Super Bowl. People whispered about it during their morning walks. The retired couple across the street were outside unusually early, watering plants that didn't need watering, just to make sure they didn't miss anything. A teenager who barely acknowledged me before gave me a respectful nod from his skateboard. And the guy 3 houses down, the one who Karen once yelled at for not pressure washing his driveway, gave me a thumbs up as he jogged by. But the real cherry on top? Someone left a plate of homemade cookies on my doorstep with a handwritten note. Thank you. From the entire block. Even the mailman chuckled as he handed me my deliveries. He leaned in and said under his breath, About time someone dealt with her. We've been praying for this day for years. It felt like the entire neighborhood had been under some kind of invisible dictatorship. Sure, we all nodded and smiled when Karen walked by, but behind those polite greetings was a mountain of resentment. She had fined people for tiny oil stains in the driveway. She had issued warnings for front lawns being half an inch too tall. She once left a formal notice of violation taped to a neighbor's window because their welcome mat was too bright and didn't match the neutral aesthetic of the neighborhood. And now, the woman who bragged about running this place like a 5-star resort had just learned that she didn't even legally own the land her house sat on, without my name appearing somewhere in the deed trail. No one was mean to her. No one egged her house. This wasn't revenge. This was karma doing its job, and doing it well. As for me, I wasn't interested in power trips or payback. But I did post one notice. I walked over to the old community bulletin board that Karen used to decorate with rules, fines, and sternly worded warnings. I removed every single laminated flyer she had posted over the past year. Then I replaced them with a single printed page. It read, effective immediately. All HOA rules and enforcement actions are suspended until further notice. This community will now operate on mutual respect, common sense, and kindness. Live peacefully. Mow your lawn. Say hi to your neighbor. PS Blue curtains are now officially approved. People read it like it was a declaration of independence. Someone clapped. Another person took a photo. Karen saw it later that afternoon. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, reading it over and over again, her mouth slightly open, as if her brain refused to believe the words in front of her. 1 week later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. A month after that, she was gone. No one threw a party. No one gloated. But when the moving truck pulled away, there was a quiet celebration in every heart on the block. As for me, I still live here. Quietly. Happily. No fines. No surprise knocks in the middle of the night. No one measuring my grass or inspecting my curtains through binoculars. Sometimes people ask me why I don't turn the place into a gated community or charge a fee. But that's not why I did any of this. I didn't want control. I just wanted peace. And now, every evening, when the sun starts to set, I walk over to my living room, close my blue curtains, and smile. Because sometimes the best kind of revenge is silent ownership. No yelling, no threats, no fines, just peace. and the knowledge that the person who tried to control the whole neighborhood never realized she was standing on my land the entire time. And that's better than any rule she ever wrote.